I was talking about how everything I'm about in life right now is about supporting people to live their own life. It it originated in an ayahuasca ceremony where I got the download that I hadn't been doing that. And then I did a deep dive into how I can reclaim and enact my original self. And then the question becomes, why is it so difficult? So to live our own life, not the life that our family wants for us, not the life that society says, the cultural norms, not the life that our marriage partner or our intimate other wants for us, but our own life. And I was suggesting that that we come into the world as an absolutely original being. Source seems to have a bias for originality. No two snowflakes, um, no two fingerprints. Uh, we are an absolute original, not a copy. And and from the get-go, I was saying that I think this even can happen in the womb. We pick up psychically, energetically, that to be ourselves is to risk being humiliated, shamed, punished, etc. And so we curate this adaptive identity. You can call it the people pleaser, but that's just one form of what I'm talking about. And then we spend our lives contorting ourselves to fit those expectations. And we spend our lives, developing antennae for who do I need to be in order to survive here. And part of it is just biological. Our brains are wired uh, for survival because we come into the world completely dependent. And so we're very sensitive um, to having to adapt to our environment just simply in order to survive. And so this itself is not a defect, obviously, because if we're not attached like this, we're going to die. And so there's a part of it just sort of naturally that when we come into the world, we're not asking who am I? We're asking what version of me keeps me safest. And it's a brilliant adaptation, but it's also the beginning of forgetting ourselves. And and then if you add to that these unfavorable conditions, what I just call failures of love, um, it 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 kind of deepens the imprint that we can't be ourselves, and then over time we simply forget. It's that simple. Uh, I've talked about the neuroscience of this, um, suggesting which suggests that the brain is not primarily a thinking machine. It does produce thoughts, but those thoughts, typically, if you've done any meditation, you'll know that it's basically the thinking is about how the hell do I survive? How do I get out of this alive? So it's asking pretty much a single question. What keeps me alive here? How do I survive these conditions? We're not asking, the thoughts aren't necessarily, unless we've taken a graduate philosophy course, like what makes me free? We're not asking what makes me authentic. We're not asking, what's true here? So the conditions are such that safety always comes first. Everything else comes later. So if you were taught, conditioned to see that in the presence of conflict, you are in danger, you will try to live a life that's conflict free. That's the adaptation. If you became visible and expressed yourself, and you discovered that that invited shaming or humiliation, then you hide in yourself. If success made your mother resentful or envious, you learn to dial it back. Because the brain isn't just remembering it is remembering the past, but it's doing more than that. It's anticipating that the same future is going to happen through the lens of the past. And a lot of these result in what I call core unconscious beliefs, or cubs. And they're not so much philosophical conclusions, they're sort of somatic conclusions that we came to. I'll be abandoned if I'm true to myself. I'm going to be rejected. I don't really matter. I'm not legitimate. I'm unworthy. I'm too much. And they don't feel like beliefs because they're operating from the unconscious. They feel like reality. They just feel to the egoic adaptation that it's just simply true. This is true of my family context, and this is true of the world out there. And in fact, we project onto that, becomes our world. The world becomes a reenactment of the unsafe conditions. We're pretty certain of it. And, again, going out from family and what we do, what our brains do, and how we adapt to unfavorable conditions close to home, then, we age. And by the time we come into adulthood, the realization is that the challenge doesn't end inside of us. The world conspires with our survival system too. And this is real. It's not just something our mind has made up, because families have mythologies about who we are and what families do. Everybody does. Somebody is appointed the successful one. My father was appointed the one who would go out of 12, he would be the educated one, even though he wanted to be on the farm, and effectively never left the farm his whole life. Somebody is designated the difficult one, maybe even the patient of the family that needs psychiatric intervention. And this person will hold the myth and the secret that the family's actually insane, but it'll choose a scapegoat. Somebody is the one who never causes trouble. You hear stories about they were so good, they slept all the time, they just it was incredible. And more often than not, I'll tell you, that baby has already learned to sleep in order not to be trouble. Somebody is appointed to carry everybody else's anxiety and stress, carry the burden of the family. And so once this is established, then, you're invested in just remaining there because it's happening unconsciously. And this doesn't happen because our families are necessarily bad people. Sometimes they are, but it's just that systems prefer stability. They don't want to be disrupted. And if you change, and we find this repeatedly when people stop their adaptation patterns, their people-pleasing patterns, every relationship within the family needs to change. And it's disruptive, and the family will do everything it can, including labeling you insane, in order to get the system back to homeostasis. But then you go to church, and church has its own myths about who you should be. I mean, religion itself carries great wisdom. I'm not complaining about religion, but they're also institutions. And institutions survive through continuity and through conformity of the members of the community. So deep questions are threatening. And I can't tell you how many people I've been with who in confirmation classes asked these unsettling questions and were actually asked to leave the class. So all these external authorities, and I spent decades in ministry, and I hope I didn't do that, but I suspect, if you wanted to be a member of the church, there were certain things you had to go along with, But it happens in so-called spiritual circles as well. You can escape religion, but then you hand your authority to a guru who claims to be the incarnation of God, and all you need to do is surrender your will to him. It can happen in psychedelic communities. Well, all you have to do is surrender your sovereignty to ayahuasca herself. So it's a different costume, but it's exactly the same psychology. And the way you can discern a true spiritual teachers is that they don't want followers. Someone like Krishnamurti, was recruited I think at the age of 8 to be the leader of the Theosophical Society. And when he stood up as a young man to give his first talk at their convention, he said, "I'm not interested." He turned it down because he was more interested in helping everybody there understand that they were their own spiritual leaders. He wanted to relocate authority inside of each person, which I have great respect for. Obviously, if we look also, social media is invested in consensus reality. Our state governments are invested in consensus reality. So, for all these reasons, it's difficult it takes courage and practice and a lot of consciousness to remain true to ourselves. It's the courage to stand alone. You think evolutionarily of an antelope that wanders from the herd, and that antelope is the most likely one to get picked off. And we have a memory of this somewhere inside of us still. It's like, don't attract attention, blend in, don't stand up for yourself, don't speak up, because that's what's going to happen to you. And I would say also part of the challenge of living your own life is that we've actually curated this adaptive identity, and we've become that to other people. So we have a certain presentation of ourselves as whatever, the nice person, the good person, the virtuous person, the caring person, the kind person, the helper, the successful professional, the strong one, the agreeable one. And people actually appreciate the performance. That's the problem. They go, "Wow, that's a nice guy. He'll pretty much do anything I want. Seems to go along with everything. Great." They reward it. They start to depend on it. Everyone knows that they can expect of you. So it's like you've curated this adaptive identity. You've signaled that that's who you are to the world. And now the world expects you to fulfill that identity and act the same. And when you change, there's going to be some hell to pay. You'll discover that people don't always appreciate it when you start speaking up for yourself, etc. They'll be disappointed, maybe. They'll be somewhat threatened. They won't understand. They'll start challenging you. And they'll even try to seduce you back into being who you are. And again, that's why it requires courage. And partly we get seduced back again, and this is important, not because we're lazy or weak or undisciplined. It's because every layer of your existence and mine has been organized around what you can just call predictability. That's what your nervous system wants. That's what it generates. Your family wants it, predictability, certainty. Institutions want it. Culture wants it. Your friends, your partner. The difficulty is that what your soul wants is originality. So there's this tension. And if the tension isn't resolved eventually, or if it's resolved in terms of like adapting to every situation, every person, and not sort of decommissioning your people pleaser, you'll eventually get anxious and depressed, and you'll be low in energy. It just happens. Because I've referred to Colin Wilson before. He's a lay philosopher and literary critic. He's gone now, but I love his writings. And he said, what human beings are seeking more than anything is intensity. And he defined that as a realization of the absolute value of life. So every experience lights you up. You realize that it's an immense privilege to be living in this world. And so you haven't because you've sort of de-layered yourself and you're living from your heart, you can feel the intensity of being alive. And I think that's really what we want. I don't even think it's happiness. Everyone pursues happiness, but I think the feeling of being alive is what actually being alive and being free is what we're actually looking for. And then that may lead to happiness. But there's also going to be a lot of suffering, but it's like clean suffering. It's suffering that's legitimate, that's yours to undergo so that you can feel alive, feel yourself, feel life again. And I just want to talk a little bit about people when they hear about becoming an individual or becoming your own person. They there's a form of this which is, it looks like you're being your own person, but it's contrarianism. So if everyone says yes, I'll say no. If someone has an opinion, you'll just take the opposite opinion. And this is a form. This is another adaptation, which is still being controlled by the crowd. The crowd is still determining your contrarian position. So we want to realize freedom, which is, no longer being unconsciously organized by the crowd. So that's why I don't even talk about healing so much anymore. But if I do, it would be like healing is the capacity to trust our own experience, to locate authority within rather than project it out into all these experts, including me, and to discover that there is a way of being that is kind of oriented around the heart, that is original, that is creative, that is spontaneous, that is grateful, that is compassionate, that is living to express itself, because that's why it came here, to be itself, himself, herself. And that's, when you look at the great people that we remember, it's these people we remember. There's something lights us up about it. It's the artists, the William Blakes of the world, it's the prophets, the Amos, the Hosea, the Kahlil Gibran. It's the mystics, the true scientists who haven't bought into scientism, like Heisenberg, Einstein, David Bohm. They're originals. You feel it. Poets. They're just describing their own experience and doing it, maybe not without fear, but they do it anyways. They do it anyways. So here's a question that I'm going to leave us with this morning. It's not so much what should I do with my life? It's simpler. It's simply, where am I living somebody else's story? Where am I protecting and defending an image that no longer actually fits? How am I remaining loyal to a survival strategy that is no longer serving me? Where am I mistaking familiarity for truth? Because the truth is, you don't have to add anything to yourself for this. It's just like a process of remembering who you were before the great adaptation, the great contortion. And that's you. So the universe doesn't require a copy of you. I know you know this. It requires you. And everything I'm offering at this point in my life, the there's a way of um, having access to all my teaching videos, and I come online once a week with a monthly. You can sign up month to month, and there's a 3 month intensive as well. And you can just go to Classroom on Zoom, click on those options, and you'll see how to access it. And that's basically, that last one is an intensive journey into dismantling ego, coming into a compassionate relationship with ego, and feeling what it's like, the actual experience of being in your heart, of being an original. Okay.